Hello everyone, welcome to EMD Media. The weekly H panel starts now. Today we will be exploring the topic of Abiy Ahmed's next move, the unknown and the known. And I have the pleasure of getting to converse on the same subject with Professor Eskel Gabisa, Faisal Roble, Yosef Karahewat. As usual, we'll start what stood out for you. Eskel, how was your week? What stood out for you?
What stood out for me is what stood out for the entire world today and this week, and that is the apparently unilateral declaration by the Ethiopian government that it declared a ceasefire to allow for humanitarian access to the Tigray region and some other parts of Ethiopia that are in need. But what stood out for me is not that they declared, but what the tension within the Ethiopian government itself. We know for a fact that they've been negotiating for some time now with the Tigrayan government. But now when they came out and declared that there is a ceasefire, they wanted to do it as if they were not coerced into doing in this by diplomatic and economic pressure, but out of their own volition. That was not the case. That demonstrates that there is no agreement within the Ethiopian government to support the peace process or the cessation of hostilities. That was a surprise that the federal government in Ethiopia does not have all its acts together, even in the pursuit of the cessation of hostilities and the end of the war that had completely devastated the entire body politic in Ethiopia. The second thing that is surprising to me is of that declaration is that even the Ethiopian government is not using those derisive and evocative words about junta, the outlaw, and all that. It's referring to the Tigray government as the other side, not recognized, but the rest of the world is now talking in terms of the Ethiopian government and the government of Tigray. It's simply a recognition of what might the eventual peace is going to look like when the governments around the world, international organizations or continental organizations in Africa are referring to the Tigray government as the government of Ethiopia, and an agreement between the government of Tigray and the government of Ethiopia. That kind of stood out to me, that Tigray or the Tigray government is now being referred to as the Tigrayan government, and possible agreement or the cessation of hostilities is recognizing that the Tigray government is in place. This is the government that the Ethiopian government, when it started the war, had declared that it's going to remove it, had removed it for 15 months, but now it is back in its place, and the rest of the world is recognizing it as such, because I guess in diplomatic parlance, in diplomatic jargon, if you refer to an entity, a political entity, as a government, it's probably de facto recognition that this is a legitimate government. So that is what stood out for me.
Great. And Faisal?
Yes, well, two things stood for me, and they will be very quick. One is upon completion of the PP convention, which was more theatrical than anything, you recall that Abiy exemplified the Somali region as the epitome of corruption and theft and chicanery. And he used Mustafa Umar as the worst example one can spot when it comes to maladministration, bad governance, and stealing money and wealth from the dying Somalis in the midst of famine. And he mentioned the illegal transfer of oil and gasoline from the Somali region to Somaliland and Somalia. With that kind of condemnation, one would have expected a significant change in terms of how the region is run. But I say theatrical simply because when the convention was finished, the Somali delegation came back, and to satisfy Abiy's swearing and all that brouhaha, what they did is they literally attacked eight small, tiny gas stations that are located in the region, four of them in Jijiga, one in Kabridahar, one in Gode, and what have you. The total asset of each gas station doesn't amount to even $500,000 of Ethiopian currency. What we are talking about when Abiy was mentioning corruption, it's in the billions of birr. As a matter of fact, the accusation was that they don't only steal the benzene and gas from the Somali region, but they also transfer other resources from other regions of Ethiopia. Is that a slap on the wrist for the regional government? What Abiy was looking is his whole program to just punish eight. Actually, the owners are no more than 5 people because one or two own one gas station or two gas stations. Is that the level of corruption Abiy was showing to the rest of the world? It's again that gimmick and the theater that they make people to listen and then do something else. So nothing has changed. Having said that, I think the other quick thing that captured my attention was somebody I've been following who is a member of the Amara regional parliament, who in the midst of the massacre in Tigray spoke several times in his words of how to treat the enemy, meaning Tigray people and Tigray region, was this. He said, if they are cruel to us, meaning to the Amaras, be cruel to them 50 times of how they are cruel. Meaning that if you expect them to be cruel at this level, be 50 times worse than they are in terms of massacre, in terms of killing, in terms of what have you. The same person was today speaking at the Amhara parliament, which I listened, who is still brewing that language of massacre. And if you can, this is the gentleman. And basically, when he's speaking, even today, you can hear the venom, you can hear the anger, you can hear the level of animosity that he has and the group that he represents. I think this ties into what Scale was saying, which is Abiy really in control of this country? Is he really running it? Or you have multiple actors that are running? And this is the time when he was saying if they are cruel. I don't know if you have the voice, the audio, but he's literally calling his followers to be as cruel as they could be, even 50 times or 50% more than. So this raises the question of what is today's Ethiopia? Is it really one country? Is it one administration? It is one governance system, or you have multiple centers of power? And it is a sad commentary, and I hope that kind of cruelty doesn't unleash itself on the people of the region.
Thank you, Faisal. What stood out?
Yes, what stood out for me was the same one that stood out for Professor Hiskel, that the unilateral ceasefire, although my take is a little bit, it differs a little bit from Professor Hiskel's. I think for me, what was deceptive was in that unilateral ceasefire was it assumes that the war is being conducted now through firepower. It assumes that the real war is going on, that is going on right now in against Tigray is through firepower. It is not. It's just the opposite is true. In fact, the war that is being conducted now is through ceasefire itself. It's through that ceasefire that the war is being conducted right now in Tigray. What do I mean by that? I mean the siege, the encirclement of Tigray. For Ethiopia, this is the ideal environment where there is no war at all, but where it encircles Tigray, and it conducts its war by suspending all kinds of services, from Tigray, medicine, food, cash, electric, fuel, and all of that. In fact, at this point in time, the Ethiopian government is killing more Tigrayans through disease and starvation rather than through all the bullets and bombs that it has been using in this 1.5 year crisis. So at this point in time, the ceasefire is a weapon that Ethiopia is using to conduct its war. So I believe it's trying to do two things. Ethiopia is trying to do two things. One is to debilitate the TDF, the Tigrayan Defense Forces, from taking action to break out of the siege. If it declares ceasefire, for example, then if the TDF tries to break the siege, the encirclement of Tigray, then it will be accused of having violated the ceasefire. It will be seen as the belligerent party. The second one is it's kind of trying to get a legitimization from the West. Remember, it's trying to conduct a diplomatic coup at this point in time with the West, because it's trying to avoid the sanctions. There are two sanctions already on the way if they pass in the United States government. So far, the response that it has gotten from the UK and the US, in fact, Getachew, we have sent as the United States response, it was very positive. So it's trying to avoid the sanctions by declaring a unilateral ceasefire, but it is using that unilateral ceasefire also at the same time to conduct its war, which is being conducted through the encirclement. I do believe that the TPLF response is a bit disappointing because it didn't point out clearly what the Abiy government is trying to do. Number one is the Abiy government is trying to show that it's trying its best to provide food and other accesses to Tigray, while laying the blame either on the TPLF, for instigating the armed confrontations in certain areas in the Afar or in Kobo areas, or at the worst, he creates this division of labor whereby the Afars and the Amharas will take the major blame for the blockage, while he himself, Abiy, or his government, will be seen as as trying its best. The TPLF hasn't made it clear, Sometimes it blames Awal Arba, sometimes it blames the Amhara nationalists. It should have, I believe, it should have clearly put the blame on Addis Ababa, that it is a design that is coming of Addis Ababa, and you could clearly see that the narrative, the narrative of the Abiy government is gaining right now. It's being accepted by the United Nations, by the US, by the UK. All of them seem to point out either at the Afars or at the confrontations that are happening in those areas for the blockage of the food aid. The other one is they should have pointed out if Abiy is sincere in his overture, if he's sincere in his peace process, if he's sincere in trying to provide food access any kind of aid access, he should start by providing all those services that is not dependent on the cooperation with Al Arba or with the Amharas. For example, he could easily put on the electric power, unfettered access of medicine, for example.
Yes.
He could start the banking, the cash. Many of the people that are dying that are having hard problems in Tigray are salaried people that use it to work for salaries. And more people are dying in Tigray with lack of medicine than lack of food at this point in time. And all other services like the internet, telephone, and all other kinds of services could all be started by the Abiy government. They don't need the cooperation of Al Arba or the Amhara leaders. The last one is Ethiopia points out that the Tigrayan, the TDF forces should withdraw from certain areas like Afar and certain Amhara areas, but the Tigrayans haven't responded in kind. That Ethiopia, that the Amhara forces also should withdraw from certain areas in Tigray, like the Western Tigray. So I thought that the biggest strategic mistake of TPLF had been that they should have never started this peace process without assuring a continuous flow of aid into Tigray. That any interruption would automatically trigger an interruption in the peace process. And last, that any continuous interruption should trigger a military response. If they had done that, I think they could have avoided the quagmire that they are finding nowadays. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Actually, all of you touched what is would be the topic of the day. So, if one looks at both statements from Addis Ababa and Magala, and some people were pointing actually the fact that Abiy has been very quick to use his Twitter, his Facebook, video, state media to say whatever he wants, but this time he is issuing these declarations through the Federal Communication Service, FDRE Communication Service. And then, among other things, at the end, there is something that says this would hopefully lead into, let me just read it directly from here. Pave the way for the resolution of the conflict in the northern Ethiopia without further bloodshed. And some are questioning whether this is sincere, and the fact that Scale was pointing out to the internal dynamics of within the party, within the government. So if we were to judge on what we know versus what is not known yet, how would we characterize this development, Professor Scale?
Yeah, I think the known factors are Abiy's government has been under pressure and is responding to pressure, economic and diplomatic pressure, and the two are not mutually exclusive. What I mean by that is that I think on this panel, we have already talked about the economic strains, that there is really no cash flow. There is rising inflation. There is foreign exchange crunch, all kinds of economic numbers that should be showing upwards are showing downwards, that should be showing things should be down are showing that they are actually high. What I mean by that is that unemployment is rising, price is rising, those should be down, but the Ethiopian government doesn't have the fluidity and the cash flow that it needs to run the government. His friends or his now, Russia or the Chinese, they're not going to provide the cash flow that he needs. They're not going to do. That's not. Further, the UAE, they have already poured sufficient cash into the Ethiopian offer, which he profligately distributed to buy off political opposition and then emulsify artists, athletes, military leaders, intelligence leaders, and business people. There is no cash that is going to come from UAE. He has exhausted that. So he needs the diplomatic support in the world, and he needs the economic support. So the known factor is that he needed this truce. I'm not talking about Ethiopia, about Amara region. These are all players in the decision making, or at least they exert tremendous amounts of influence or pressure on Abiy's government. He has to be able respond to the pressure from them. Regardless, to run the government and to continue the routine task or function, he needed this truce. He needed to respond to the diplomatic pressure from the European Union, from the United States, and everywhere else. Even China had been pushing. He had to respond to the diplomatic pressure, even from the UAE, which was delivering some goodwill gestures to Tigray, and also promising to participate as a positive influence in bringing about the cessation of hostilities and end to violence. So the diplomatic pressure on him was so tremendous, and that coupled with the economic pressure, he needed this truce. For now, he must continue this path. He's trying to balance, he's trying to thread the needle, but this is what he needed. That's what we know. What we don't know, the unknown part, is what his political allies are going to do, because they don't need this truth. In order to build in the Amhara region, the Fano and other paramilitary armed groups, they needed the excuse of continuing the war in order to vent their hatred, this unalloyed, unadulterated hatred that they have for Tigrayans and Oromos. They want to continue this war for their own reasons. They want to continue this war, and the person that you showed, this guy, Boyalo, Johannes Boyalo, he is one person in the Amhara government who does not gloss over what the feelings are over there. He had said, bear in mind this, he had said this before, that Abiy is like a foam. It's like a foam. He's not needed. For now, he will be sitting atop the beverage, but they will just blow it off when the time comes. So that's what the Amhara attitude is, and he's come back. He's come back to reiterate what he had said so far. So the unknown part is his political coalition is shaky to sustain the path that he has embarked on to bring about an end to the violence and cessation of hostilities. The other player is Eritrea. Eritrea does not want this truce. They don't want this cessation of hostilities. He wants, for his own internal reasons and for venting his hatred toward Tigrayans and vent his drive for vengeance, he's going to need this war to continue. So that's the unknown factor, how he is going to be able to sustain the negotiations with the TPLF and deliver on the promise of not only ending the war, but allowing unimpeded, unencumbered access, humanitarian access for humanitarian aid delivery. That's the unknown part. The known part is he needed this truth. The unknown part is that the political alliance that he is sitting atop is not sufficient. This path to negotiated settlement, political and military settlement.
Great, thank you, Scale. When you look at the responses, so from starting from the State Department that was mentioned as positive, and then you have the Europeans actually copy pasted the same message. All the officials that have anything to do with the international relations. They copy pasted how they are very positive about that. The UK the same, and in some of them they go beyond expressing their delight. They asked for example, this is from the House Foreign Affairs Committee, lead Republican. He asked actually that there has been empty promises before, so this time what would be different? So we need to see something. But he's also looking for the demand in terms of communication, banking services to be restored, like Joseph was mentioning. Faisal, what unknowns do you see? We know that this is presented as a unilateral one. The government is not presenting it as if it's part of a negotiation or a discussion or an agreement. So, what are the unknowns and the knowns for you?
Well, first of all, let me say I totally agree with what Scale put on the table. Abiy is not doing this in kind. Neither are the donors and the Westerners are doing this in kind. They all want this problem to go away. I think Abiy is doing because he has the pressure, and I don't want to revisit that. The pressure is that Scale enumerated. But I really like to put all this into a context. So we know several things about Abiy. We know that Abiy has usurped power up to this point without regard to constitution of the country. He was helped by gurus like Izema and Amara gurus to just give what he wanted. And we know that there was a parliament that rubber stamped through legislative process what Abiy Ahmed wanted. Burtukan also played a role, the election commission, for Abiy to consolidate his power. We know that much. We also know that Abiy really prepared the war since 2018. I shared with you guys one time I ran into a Tegra doctor who worked in the Somali region as a doctor. We traveled together to Nairobi from Addis. And then that's July 2018 that she told me what was brewing among Tigray families, that they were already sensing the animosity that Abiy was preparing. By 2019, Abiy was in full gear with Isaias to really start a war on Tigray, no matter what people say about the Northern Command or what have you, but the war that started in November 2020, we all know that was prepared and strategized with Isaias way before November 2020. And we said, all of us agree that this war started as a law to bring back law and order. Then he moved to destroying the junta, which is what Abiy said. We didn't even raise the name TDF or TPLF. He also talked about fighting terrorism. He also talked, and we know all this, that he's saving the unity of the country by destroying Tigray. We also know that he said he was engaging war of conscience for Ethiopia. And all this we know. What we don't know about Abiy is what he wants from Tigray. Does he really want Tigray from, as Yosef was saying, does he really want a peace, a full-blown peace with Tigray? If so, what else does Tigray need today, right away? Because the truth that Abiy released says this will take effective right now. Well, it needs medicine, it needs the banking system, it needs light to have some light in its homes of its people and 5 million, 6 million people. And he's not doing that. So you know from there on that Abiy's number one agenda, we know that for sure, that he's not going for peace. Many people also doubt that Abiy just probably wants, and this is the unknown, is does he want really peace or does he want to buy time, which both Scale and Yosef hit, to buy time so that he can demolish the movement in Oromia? Is he looking for enough room to rearm himself so that he can again ambush a new war against TDF, as well as bring in total destruction to the resistance that we have seen in Oromia. So with all that, we don't know, but we do know also that Abiy is finally what some people may call the triple authorities that some African leaders never had, that Abiy today had. Abiy sees himself as a prophet, therefore anything that he says in Ethiopia should go, whether that's changing regional presidents, whether that is, doing whatever he wants with Tigray. He is your prophet. Then Abiy has finally set on the pedestal of being a fully blown autocratic ruler in Ethiopia. And we have seen that how he managed the convention. We have also seen how tyrant he is in terms of really switching on and off of how people in the region and in Ethiopia can live. So there are a lot of unknowns that are here. We do know Abiy is not serious about peace. We do know Abiy wants to modify the pressures he's getting from the West. We do know that Abiy wants to buy time. What we don't know is what Abiy's trajectory is in this situation. Does he want full peace? Is he on the right course to achieving peace with Tigray and even with Oromia? Because the war in Oromia is interlinked with the war in Tigray, because all of these, conflicts that we have seen are rooted in this region is to ask for their regional autonomy within the Ethiopian constitution. We don't really know what Abiy wants from Ethiopia. All we know, as Joseph and Skel said, is he is in a bind at this point in time, and he wants to get out of that news, whether that is the resolution is pending on sanctioning Ethiopia, whether it is lack of cash in the coffers, whether it is the fact that he's losing both the Oromo support, the Tigray support, the Amhara support, and the other regions, including Somali region. He is in nowhere at this point in time, and he's trying to control these tides that are hitting. How he's going to control those tides, we don't know.
Lots of unknowns there, yeah. Yusuf, on I think in one of the H panels we covered how Eritrea and Ethiopia voted in the General Assembly of the UN when it comes to the Russian-Ukraine crisis, and this is from yesterday compared to what we had last time. So during the 2nd of March, I think we saw clearly Eritrea voting against with the Republic of Korea and Russia, of course, and Syria and so on. And Ethiopia at that time decided to leave. It was not present there. And yesterday, that seems to change, at least for Ethiopia. Ethiopia was in and it abstained, while Eritrea, again, with North Korea and so on. So we talked as well about Bahar Dar, Asmara, and Samara maybe axis. And do you see Asmara undermining in any way what, at least symbolically, is humanitarian truce from Abiy? What do we see? What do we know about Eritrea's reaction, and maybe the regional one, and what are the unknowns?
Okay, I'll try to put it within the bigger picture, if you'll allow me. Yeah?
Yes, sure.
I think that the known is, as Hezkel has said, the economic crisis. I would add plus the Tigray crisis, both of them of which are also connected to one another. And the unknown is, as Faisal said, is it war or peace? The road. Now, if you look at it, on the one hand, we are seeing, we shouldn't forget that there is a mass preparation for war going on in Ethiopia right now. The latest news that I have heard was that there are about 8 core I don't know exactly one corps, is it 3 or 5 divisions, but it amounts around to 120 to 150,000 soldiers are amassed right now in the northern part of Ethiopia. And that doesn't include the militias and the special forces. So we are looking at around 250,000 soldiers amassed in the northern part of Ethiopia. Part of that had been the 60,000 trained Amharas by Eritrea. Since we are talking about Eritrea right now, by Eritrea, they are already transferred through Western Tigray to the Gondar area, about 60,000 in addition to the militias that have been already there. So we are looking at a mass preparation for war on the one hand, and then there is the armaments that are being bought from especially Azerbaijan has been one of the biggest sources for Ethiopia recently. Then, of course, there is the siege, that's the ongoing siege of Tigray, and then also we have to look at the peace process. It has been an extended peace process, which means it runs parallel with the extended siege of Tigray. It's made in such a way that it will have inflict, it will have a maximum kind of damage on the people of Tigray if both the peace process and the siege continue for a period of time. Now here is a question that comes, and we'll come to your question in regard to Eritrea when we look at this one. Think about the dilemma that Abiy is facing right now. Does he want to talk, even if he can, let's say, if he thinks he can do it, does he want to totally destroy Tigray? Does he want to totally subjugate Tigray? That who would be who would profit from that? Okay, the first one that would profit from that would be the Amharas. They will get their Raya, they will get their Western Tigray, their Walqait. And the remaining small part of Tigray will be destroyed in such a way that it will be more or less an extension of Amhara. Remember that the Amharas are posturing. Their main posturing is not against Tigray. Their biggest, they are strategizing to face off the Oromo. That is their main aim. So by hook or by crook, they would have to bring Tigray on their side. Of course, it's in a weird way. What they are doing is by destroying Tigray, they are bringing Tigray to the Amhara side, so that they will have the old Habesha order, and then they could face off the Oromos. That is the biggest plan that the Amharas are having right now. Now, who is with them in regard to this? Eritrea. So the moment the total destruction of Tigray is being done, you have consolidated the connection between the Amharas and Tigray. It will become inseparable. They will become inseparable, and then they would make their move to depose whom? To depose Abiy himself for their final confrontation with the Oromos. So knowing this, would Abiy be foolish enough to go all the way to destroy Tigray? That is number one. Okay. Now, of course, we'll come to what you have mentioned, which is also what previously Professor Hizkel has mentioned. That is the Eritrean-Amhara alliance. The Eritrean-Amhara alliance is critical because it's not Amharas separately or Eritreans separately, severed from one another, severed from one another. Eritrea will have almost zero influence, zero pressure on Abiy if they are severed from one another. The Amharas will still have pressure, but they will not have in the kind of pressure that they are having now over Abiy, the influence that they have over Abiy. More or less, the connection between the link between Amhara and Tigray had a multiplier effect. Now the question is, they are almost joined in the hip. Both of them are joined in the hip, and that hip is Western Tigray. if Western Tigray, it is through Western Tigray that the Amharas and the Eritreans are connected. If Western Tigray is taking from them, then the connection will be totally severed between Amhara and Eritrea, and they would have no more the kind of influence that they have over Abiy. So will Abiy go ahead and do that? If he is, really serious about an everlasting peace in that area, the thing that he should do is return Western Tigray to Tigray. That will be the master stroke. The master stroke that would bring the Eritrea's influence over Ethiopia to zero. Overnight, it would bring it to zero, because all Eritrea's influence is through the Amharas, and Eritrea knows that. That's why it's doing its best at this moment, not only to solidify its link with the Amharas, but to derail any kind of peace process. To some extent, it's also doing that with the Afars right now, because it's looking at the picture, and what it's trying to do is, if it ever fails, if it loses Western Tigray, the only way it could make a connection with the Amharas would be through the Afar, and so it's trying to find an alternative route to establish that link also. So will he do it? That is the question to me. The unknown is, will he do it? Because without, in fact, recently, I think it was yesterday or the day before that, there was a speech by Dr. Debretsion, and it was entirely focused on Eritrea, and he kept mentioning that without eliminating the interference of Eritrea in Ethiopia, it would be impossible to have a peaceful resolution to this crisis. And that is exactly what he meant. But it's not Eritrea per se separately. That's why my emphasis is, it's the connection between the Amhara and the Eritrea that is at the root of the cause. If you cut that link, then the peace process, the peace would have a chance in that area. Will he do it? I don't know. But in addition to that, think about this. It would even turn out to be, if the Western Tigray returns to Tigray, Tigray would be a buffer zone between Eritrea and Ethiopia. It would even be a means of protecting Ethiopia itself, simply by severing that tie between Amhara and, because the Amharas, all their power they are getting right now is from Eritrea. So is he going to do it? That remains the biggest unknown to me.
Thank you, Yosef. One thing that is, I think Yosef asked before, maybe Professor Zgel and Faisal, if you can comment on that. When it comes to the government of Ethiopia, there is a demand that, for example, the withdrawal from Afar of Tigray forces. While in the Tigray response, we don't see that the withdrawal of Eritrean and Amhara Ethiopian forces from Western Tigray, Eritrean forces from northeastern Tigray as well from Europe. But there is another way of what we saw in one of their demands is where they talk about this not connecting, not linking political and humanitarian issues from the Tigray side. So are we seeing a Tigray government that's just taking Abiy seriously and not demanding in terms of Western Tigray and the other parts of Tigray? What's your reading of that, Professor Zgel?
No, absolutely not. I think the Tigrayan government leaders are, number one, being practical. Practical meaning that there is no way, there is no political capital that Abiy has amassed that would make them trust what Abiy is doing. All they are doing at this point in time is taking one step at a time and see to it whether Abiy is going to deliver on the promises that he made. Tigray or anybody else cannot trust Abiy because he cannot be trusted with the words that he gives to anyone. So they're just taking one step at a time, not to enlarge this issue, not to bring about a lot of promises, not to put a lot of demands in place, because practically they have to test whether Abiy means what he says. They also understand the political and economic forces behind his action. Keep in mind that the political system that he had put in place is not firmly in place, to be sure. He cannot rely on it because this is not a cohesive political party that could rally behind him for any reason. It's still a fractured political party. So the Tigray leaders also understand that. So they're trying to extract as much as possible, one day at a time. It's not about long-term negotiations. On the delivery of aid, on the opening of the road to Tigray, they have to test him, whether he means what he says. And the second thing is, for Tigray today, for Tigray leaders today, saving lives is extremely important. So they're not going to jeopardize the possibility of delivering aid, delivering food and medicine and other needs by putting demands forward. All those demands about land, about the constitution, about multinational federation, about referendum, these are all in place, but they're being practical with regard to Abiy because he is absolutely untrustworthy. One thing that I want to say about the issue that everybody raised, if we are talking about behavioral analysis, knowing who Abiy is and basing our analysis on that, the only thing that moves Abiy is power. It's not principle. Abiy, if making peace is the path for him to ensure that he remains in Arakilos Palace for some time, he will do it. If it is war, if war is what ensures that he remains in the palace, which he loves, by the way, he tells everybody that he had built his office or remodeled his office to his own liking and rebuilt the palace to his own liking. And he says, nobody's going to drag me out of this place that I have made myself comfortable in. The only thing that matters, Abiy, is not the principle. It's not about his responsibility as prime minister to the people of Ethiopia, to the Horn of Africa, or his duty to sustain peace in the Horn of Africa for world peace. Those are not considerations for him. The only thing that makes him move is that he ensures power, that he remains in power. That's all he needs. There's nothing that, not the constitution, not the federation, not economic well-being, not political cohesion, not national integration. All of those things are absolutely immaterial to him. So the Tigray leaders are simply looking at who he is and trying to test whether he means what he says, one day at a time and one step at a time, and not to jeopardize if there is a possibility of delivering it to Tigray. Beyond personality analysis, there are economic forces in Ethiopia that Abiy cannot control. There are political forces that Abiy cannot control in Ethiopia. I think the analysis about land and land swap, they're important, but I think the center of gravity of power, economic power and political power has shifted in Ethiopia to the south. In that sense, whatever political calculations that Isaias makes or Amara leaders make, it's not going to matter that much as long as, like I said, the economic and political forces, the center of gravity of political and economic forces in Ethiopia is no longer in the north, it's really south. And the rise of the Indian Ocean Rim economy is going to make this even more so. So, the traditional politics in Ethiopia might grind on, but there is a new reality in Ethiopia that is really different from the factors that have influenced Ethiopian politics and Ethiopian history in the past.
Thank you for that. Faisal, you can comment on that as well. But maybe I want to add one thing that from the General Assembly of the TP, the ruling party, the major shift is Gaddu and Boyalo, the one we played before, and others who could have potentially challenged his decision to do whatever he wants in terms of the war, are out of the Central Committee, the Executive Committee, all that. So some are saying that this might point out to, paving the way for Abiy to do war or peace as he wishes. If you can comment on that. Then if we look at closely the statement from Blinken, there is a statement that says a lasting solution to the conflict must involve accountability for those responsible for atrocities, which is missing from many of these discussions. So this is in response to the humanitarian truce. And then he also mentions, I don't know if we can make a big deal out of that, but he's mentioning he urges, or the United States urges all parties to build on this announcement to advance a negotiated and sustainable ceasefire, including necessary security arrangements. Is there anything that we can read from that, Faisal?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think the US is extremely satisfied with the current truce and this information that the US government released, as well as Blinken is follow up and tweet that he tweeted, have been heavily distributed by the US State Department for all its mailing lists. I received this information several times between today and yesterday to just publicize and the determination that the US State Department would like to express on this issue. So all these issues that you're mentioning, including accountability, I think that this is on the one hand, the US and the West seems to be showing this good gesture towards what Abiy agreed finally, because as we repeatedly said, he's on the driver's seat. TPLF Tigray didn't initiate the war. He was the one who was using heavy armaments. He was the one who cut off the lights for millions of people, including medicine. As Yosef really aptly put it, he killed more Tigrayans probably not through the bullet, but because of holding food and medicine behind. I think that's an important fact to underline. So the US and the West is happy about this development, and they want to really institutionalize and push this forward so that Abiy doesn't slide. I think they will support Abiy to go, on the whole 9 yard to make sure that this truce becomes meaningful. What we as a panel doubting, knowing Abiy's track record, is whether he thinks again, one more time, that he can fool the entire world, including the West. This time, I think he realized that you can fool the people, several times, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. I think he seems to be understanding that, and with the couple of the resolutions that are on the table, and the previous functions hit on him, the fact that the West showed how they can destroy his economy if he doesn't behave, which is in shambles. I think he's waking up to that as much as an autocrat and a tyrant can work. Because with a tyrant, the problem is that there are no institutions, there is no parliament, there is no cabinet that he is accountable to. He's accountable to his own conscience, and his conscience hasn't proved so far right. In terms of the Gedu and the Bailo and those people, I think as individuals they are meaningless because they have no power at this point in time in the scheme of Ethiopian politics. But they factor in the web of Amara game that we have often talked about, the tripartite access of Isaias, the Amara elite, and in the past Addis Ababa, meaning the Aret Kilo. Now Aret Kilo seems not to belong to that tripartite power, at least as we see. So that leaves, I think, Eritrea and the Amara elite and what they can do. I honestly believe the two are like what we have seen with Abiy is a tactical alliance with several groups, including the Amara, which I always thought that it was a tactical alliance, not a strategic alliance with Amara elites. Again, the Eritrean Bahrdar alliance is a hollow one that has no strategic. They only identified the enemy that they have in common, but they don't have common grounds historically, politically, ideologically. As we know, Eritrea would not like, and some people may not take this lightly, Eritrea would not like to see a strong Ethiopia in the future or for a long time unless democratic cultural system is introduced into the whole region where people who are brothers and sisters can work along borders. As long as you don't have that, as long as Ethiopia is in shambles and political upheavals are all around, Eritrea knows that the number one enemy that it has in the geopolitics of the Horn of Africa is not Somalis, is not Oromo, is not even Tigray. With the Tigray, ideologically, they have a problem with the elites. I think historically, if you go back all the way to the 1960s, the groups that Eritrea strategically sees as an enemy, and when I say Eritrea, it goes beyond Isaias, is the ideology that the Amhara elite has tried to enforce in the Horn of Africa. That's domination of one culture throughout the Horn. So how long that would last, I'm not sure. I think it's coming to an end. The more pressure is exerted on Amhara elite, the more the world moves into a peaceful resolution of the conflict between Tigray and Addis Ababa, which in itself is very huge and a mountain to lift. The more we find that common ground, the more food is released and roads are open for people to really get over the hump of the problem that they are facing. I believe both Mekelle and Addis Ababa would come closer to their sense and they can talk about political issues. Where I don't see the things to change in the immediate future is the Amara demand on the entire Ethiopia, because that is deep rooted in the history and ideological problem that the current leadership of Amhara have shown in the last 30 years, which is to completely deny the rights of the people in the region. And that in itself manifests through this conflict that we see. Having said that, I really welcome, and we over probably dealt with that. The current truth is not in itself substantive beyond helping people to feed. If it's utilized very well and in the right way, this truth and this safe passage for food aid to Tigray could be grounds for bringing to the table not only Tigray and TDF and TPLF, but also Oromo and other groups, which opens a door for Abiy to choose either a coalition of those forces that support what we call multinational federal system of Ethiopia that includes Tigray, Somalis, Oromo, Sidama, and what have you, or Abiy get frozen in what he has initially tried, which was to side with the groups whose history will never come back. That is the unidimensional kind of politics. And I think Abiy, in my opinion, has seen the crossroad that he stands on this. And in my good gesture, although we talked about the unknowns, in my soft part of my heart, I feel like he may even inquire in the back doors if he can change his direction.
Can I add a little bit? Huh? This is how I see it, When it comes to Tigray, at this point in time, it shouldn't be its priority. Ceasefire shouldn't be its priority for obvious reasons that I have mentioned before. Ceasefire, while having the siege or the encirclement, is for Ethiopia to have the best of two worlds. Without firing a shot, Ethiopia will bring the total destruction of Tigray. So ceasefire as it is shouldn't be the primary goal for Tigray. What should be is it should come out as a result of the peace process. I mean, the peace. If Ethiopia, for example, opens up its the access to food aid to all kinds of services, then ceasefire would follow up. If that is the case, then by responding to to Abiy's offer of ceasefire in the way the TPLF has done, kind of undermines its basic objective. That was my whole point. It should prioritize. It should bring forth its primary objective should be the presumption. I mean presuming the access of all kinds of services to Tigray. That's why I say one of the responses that it should have made was to point out to the world that if Abiy really wants to provide help to Tigray, then he should start giving that kind of help by beginning from what he could do without the help or without the cooperation of other forces, be it Afar or Amhara. If they could have pointed out that, then they could put doubt into the mindset of the Western world, which is simply looking at the words that of Abiy and taking it as a fact. Instead of that, they should have tried to put doubt into the Western mind. That's what I meant by that one. So the idea of ceasefire should be taken very carefully, because we are looking at it as a positive thing. But it could only when you put it in a context should it be taken as a positive thing. That's what I mean.
Okay, great. I think maybe we can go on that, starting from you, Yosef, on the final words. I don't know if you have seen this, but the Eritrea explaining its position of opposition to the UN resolution is mentioning that the task of humanitarian assistance is ongoing. There should be an earnest effort on the political track to end the conflict. It's talking about Russia-Ukraine conflict and so on. So if you want to comment on that, you can. Otherwise, what's your final word?
I am not sure exactly what Yamana Gabriel is saying. Is he saying that in regard to Ethiopia or to the Ukraine?
To the Ukraine, actually, he's explaining why they opposed again
the
resolution on, because the subject matter was humanitarian consequences of the aggression.
All right, okay, there should be an illness. Okay, all right, okay. Well, I'm not going to comment on that one. I will say on the track, there is something about, what the Isaias regime has been doing in all of this. If you have looked at what it has been doing in Ethiopia, it has never taken the concept of nation seriously. Eritrea has never taken it. It didn't start today. In fact, I believe that the Eritrean government has finessed this art when dealing with the Sudan with the Sudanese government. It has always bypassed the official government in Khartoum, and it has always dealt with tribes inside Sudan. At the beginning, it was those tribes in the southern part of Sudan, which in the end culminated in the separation of South Sudan as a nation. But its main one was in regard to the Beja tribes in eastern Sudan, because it's contiguous with Eritrea. Now, whenever it wanted anything from the Sudanese government, what the Asmara government does is instigates the Beja tribes in eastern Sudan to do its bidding. Usually, it's a form of blackmailing. So much so that at one time, the eastern part of Sudan was a de facto Eritrean territory. Kassala, you can't, any Eritrean who has escaped from Eritrea wouldn't stay long in Kassala. They have to find a way to enter Khartoum as fast as they could, because it could easily apprehend them back to Eritrea with the cooperation of the Beja tribes inside Sudan. So that is the formula that it has used in Ethiopia. When dealing with Ethiopia, it surmised, people think that it is with Abiy. His main alliance was with Abiy, Isaias, but no, he had done a parallel diplomacy. One was with Abiy, but the greater part that the greater alliance was with the Amhara. He used the same formula he used in Sudan. So he always believed. In fact, you could call it, ironically, a federalist when it comes to doing things. He doesn't believe on nations, but on ethnic groups. If he could only find the triggering point, that is the whole point. He believes that there is always enough hate within a nation among ethnic groups that if he could only point the triggering point, he could make them easily allies with him or against him, as in the case of Amhara and Tigray. He found it in Western Tigray. That triggering point, he found it in Western Tigray. That's why he focused on Western Tigray, because he knew that if he is only going to entangle them in the enmity that they have with Tigray, it has to be based on a much robust basis, and that robust basis was Western Tigray. So he believes that there is a greater lifespan in dealing with ethnic groups, in the relation with ethnic groups, rather than with governments. So I believe that eventually he always suspected that his relationship with Abiy will come to an end. He always believed that. But he believed that there will be, he could have his relation with the Amharas, there will be a longer lifespan of relationship with the Amharas concerned. And that's exactly what he's doing now. I believe that the latest move that he has made, imagine, training 60,000 soldiers is not an easy task. He did that in spite of the wish of the Ethiopian government. He did that with an understanding with the Amhara leaders in Amhara. So he is aiming at a relationship that lasts, well over after it ends with Abiy. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks. We have sources telling us that Eritrean forces, some units of Eritrean forces are in the Amhara region, that is in the center, so south center. So it's not in the through the Afar region. So there is still active presence of Eritrean forces
in the Sokota areas.
Sokota
areas. He's trying to. That is, the same way the Eritrean forces played a role in Gashena and in the Mille, especially in the Mille area, coming directly from Asab. That was one of this, critical battles that brought the Tigrayan armies back to Tigray. So he's trying to find the weakest and also the shortest distance to Mekelle, and he believes that is through Sokota, and that's why there is a heavy concentration of Eritrean troops right now over there. So he is trying his best to derail this process. So how much will Abiy succeed in obstructing him? I'm not sure, because at this point in time, I don't think he can afford to totally go against Eritrea. So he's trying to balance things, but we don't also exactly know what he wants. As Professor Hitzkiel has said, his primary aim is his power. But still, the question still comes: in order to stay his power, is he choosing war or peace? Nobody knows.
Yeah. Yeah. Professor Sgel, your final word for today?
Yeah, I think let's go back to where we started it, the discussion today. This humanitarian truce, the way I see it, what they have right now is not a negotiated ceasefire. This is not a negotiated. Instead, they've been talking, and Anthony Blinken has got it right. This is not a negotiated truce yet. This is not a negotiated ceasefire yet. It's simply an indefinite humanitarian truce declared by the Ethiopian government to expedite the delivery of aid to Tigray. So negotiations for a permanent ceasefire or cessation of hostilities or a negotiated political settlement to the entire conflict, that is ways off. That's not where we are. So what is important at this point in time is not political calculation. It's not about what would happen to Tigray, the relationship with Ethiopia, what would happen to Abiy. That's not calculated at this stage. We're talking about life-saving assistance. People are dying in Tigray. People are not only dying, they're trekking out of Tigray to the Amhara region, looking for food. People are dying on their beds in hospitals for lack of medicine. So the first step is that this is a 5-step process. Maybe it has 2 parts, but a 5-step process. Right now, the work is about life-saving assistance. This is to save lives. That's the first thing. And I think Anthony Blinken got it, or the Americans got it right in recognizing that the task today is not political calculation or the permanent end to the war itself. That's a long ways off. So the second thing is here, on the life saving is important to save lives. It has to be done in the days. That's what life saving means. But the delivery of aid in general requires sustaining. It must be sustained. Ethiopia cannot allow for 1 week or 2 weeks and then stop. We're not going to go back here. So the first part is the humanitarian part, beginning with life-saving activities and then moving to a sustained delivery or system of delivery of humanitarian assistance to Tigray and other parts of Ethiopia, even in Amhara and Afar regions. So that is the humanitarian part. 2 points about the humanitarian part. Then you can go to the political military part, which is about finding a negotiated settlement. And again, let me emphasize that the American Secretary of State also got this one right. That is after the life-saving and humanitarian assistance. Then you have created the context, the environment to tackle the political issues that had led to the war in the first place. So in that, there are 3 parts. I said 5 points, and there are 3 parts in that respect as well. It is a genuine and inclusive political process to achieve progress towards keywords here: common security and prosperity for the Ethiopian people. Recognition that Tigray is not going to disarm. There is no way that they could disarm and sustain, recover the lands that they lost and protect the people of Tigray. That is, the issue must be served first. Security arrangements is going to be paramount in the discussion. The Ethiopian government is going to demand that Tigray disarm. Tigray cannot disarm. It's impossible. Surrounded by hostile neighbors, there is no guarantee. There is no political guarantee. There is no international architecture of peace that would guarantee the survival of the people of Tigray. So that is a recognition that Tigray is not going to disarm. Some kind of security arrangement is going to be needed. That's one. The second is accountability. Of course, he says all sides. What was done in Tigray and the rest of Ethiopia, what was the atrocity crimes that were committed? If they are not brought, the people who committed them were not brought to accountability, there will not be lasting peace. It cannot happen without justice. And this is the responsibility of the rest of the world. Genocide, in my view, had been committed in Tigray, and the world cannot forgive genocide, because that would mean that to dictators everywhere around the world, in Africa in particular, now they can invade and get away with it if accountability is not included in the negotiated settlement in Ethiopia. So they raised an important issue of security and accountability. So that is part of the negotiated settlement. So the security arrangement is important. So the negotiated settlement hasn't started, but the parameters are clear right now that the people of Tigray are going to have to determine their own fate, maybe through a referendum. But the negotiations, the parameters of the negotiated settlements are clear: accountability, security, and the restoration of the right of the people to determine their own fate. So that is the way I see it, and that is the way it ought to be. I don't think Tigray is in a position today, or Tigrayan leaders are in a position to say today, we have to have this negotiations before anything else, while people are dying in droves. So I think this is well conceived. I think it's a good thing that they are negotiating. It's a good thing that Tigrayan leaders are not taking Abiy for his word, or even the international community for their support, but looking at the process one day and one step at a time. But to proceed to try to save lives is absolutely the right thing to do. And they did not want to jeopardize that process or antagonize anybody else in this. Very carefully, they are taking small baby steps towards a negotiated settlement. But this is simply to create an environment for negotiations, not yet there.
Thank you, Sgal. Faisal, your final word for the day?
Yes, I think TDF TPLF is correct at this point in time to accept the truth, because millions of lives are at stake. Without any condition for the food aid and medicine and what have you to go to Tigray is probably the most prudent public position that one can take. I think there would be stages. I agree with Scale. There would be stages of the negotiation. Issues would be dealt with in a deeper meaning. I'm very much privy of the fact that the U.S. State Department, through the office of Blinken, has been putting a lot of hours back and forth to really get to this point within the last few months. And it seems like they have finally broke the ice. And the State Department sees this as a good beginning. Ethiopians may differ or analyze from different directions, but as far as the U.S. State Department, from my understanding, they see this as the beginning of possibly a new phase for negotiated settlement in the Ethiopian quagmire and Ethiopian condition. I think still we don't know how the full-blown peace talks would look like. These are not peace talks. I totally agree with Skial, and I said earlier, these are not peace talks. These are just truce of hostility at this point in time, so that food aid can get. I think there will be talks, open talks, about peace and how that peace would look like, and it will bring a lot of issues to the surface, including the issue of security, including the issue of coexistence and accountability, because Ethiopia, whether somebody likes or not, is coming out of the brink of a civil war. Civil war that could have resulted in the Yugoslavia style of Ethiopian disintegration. Abiy literally took this country to a full-blown disintegration, and still it's not out of the waters. As you can see, the groups who are vying for and where Tigray is standing, the fact that Tigray in its totality, not only TPLF, the entire millions of the Tigray people, even those in the diaspora, cannot trust their peace and well-being in the hands of the Ethiopian government, period. They will not also do the errors and the mistake that OLF and ONLF did in the past, although OLF recaptured its strength by doing the OLA version. ONLF gave in its security of its people too early. I don't think TDF would do that, and I don't think they should do that. Having said that, I'm not really so much worried about if Ethiopia in itself internally resolves its conflict, particularly between the three major groups of Tigray, Addis Ababa, and Oromia question. I think Eritrea will not be much of a problem. You have to understand that Eritrea is only a 30-year-old country. It doesn't have strong, solid institutions that can last. That means if Ethiopia is together, if Abiy can resolve some of his internal issues, even if he doesn't come into full terms with the hodgepodge forces of the Amara elite, if he really coalesces the powers of Oromia and, for that matter, Tigray and other regions, Sidama and Somalis, Eritrea cannot stand a long-term conflict with Ethiopia and still maintain its system of governance. Its institutions are weak. Dictatorial systems have really eroded the solidity of what those institutions do have. It's just that, as Yosef was saying, it became very skilled in exploiting the weaknesses that Ethiopia has, not only now, even when it was a rebel group through EPLF, Eritrea became the master and a master of exploiting the weakness of Ethiopia. And still it's doing that, but this time its circle is narrowing. I don't think any Oromo in the foreseeable future, no Oromo power will trust as Isaias and his henchman. I don't think Somalis will trust. So it's true with Tigray. He has one card, and that's the Amara card. But you have to understand that the Amara card is not today as popular as it would have been, say, in the early 70s when EPRP had some sort of sway among some of the intellectuals in Ethiopia. How far the Eritrea Amhara alliance go in terms of really carrying to sabotage the current peace, I don't know. But all I know is that it's not a strategic alliance and it may be disruptive, but it may not really have a lifeline and a span of life that can go on for a long time. And with that, I think Abiy needs to move to the center. I think Abiy needs to start talking to Oromo groups and bring the political power to the center, which is where the economy and most of the population of Ethiopia are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. With that, we end today's show. And we will come back again with yet another topic on the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, and the region. Thank you for your time. Before we sign off today, we want to mention that His Holiness Patriarch Matthias, who spoke just a week ago about the atrocities, genocide in Tigray and beyond, his life is endangered. We received information from people who are very close to the church that there is a coordinated attack both from within the church and from the government. So we want to mention that those who can visit him, and especially from the diplomats in Addis, we want to bring to your attention that His Holiness's life, according to sources very close to the church and very close to the government, there is a coordinated attack on his safety and security. And we want also to share that what have been said today and yesterday in terms of the humanitarian truce is a matter of days before we can see whether that has some substance to it. As the lead Republican in the House Foreign Affairs Committee mentioned, not weeks, days should show us what has unfolded the past 2 days. Thank you for following us. We were live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Those who have been watching this, please share so that many can access this material. And we'll be back with yet another edition of the Weekly H Panel next week. Bye from here.